Hello, my name is Olivia DeVinci with Market Education for Kimball Office, and in this session I'd like to explore a little bit more in depth the auto brackets feature with Kimball Office. First, auto brackets is used by selecting the automation tool palette. The tool palette, I'm going to turn it off here, can be identified on your Cap Designer toolbar. On the far left hand side you'll see an icon, and if you hover over it you'll see Automation Center. With Automation Center selected, you'll now see a tool palette appear. Typically that tool palette, if you've selected it for the first time, might come up on Excite, and you would have to change to the Interworks EQ option set from the drop-down list. Also notice the tabs that you see here. You might have on your personal computer more tabs than Kimball Office and National Office based on how many catalogs you have loaded. Now when you look at this series of icons, the very first icon that I would like you to consider using first, just to make sure that automations run correctly, is the AH User Preferences. Now with AH User Preferences, you will see a dialog box appear that identifies the notes page first. And there are a series of notes here that are helpful in terms of specification. I'm going to uncheck so the Notes tab does not always appear first, and this will be my default setting for all panel series, so you may want to consider leaving that checked. Next, I'm going to go to the General tab. Now the General tab gives me my possible selections. Well, with Interworks EQ being an easy, quick system, my material is always fabric and my top cap profile is always crowned. Notice I have a check mark under Use End Trims. This is the default setting because last time I selected this setting for my panels. Now once these selections have been made, you can select Done. So my preferences have been set. Now if you find that the computer comes back to you and says no library selected, go ahead and hit OK. The computer will then prompt you to select a library. Under Auto Hardware, it's going to give me a pick box. Now this pick box, what the Cap is looking for you to do is make sure that everything that's inside that box that you're getting ready to create a hatch around is where you want the connector. If you cross through it, it doesn't acknowledge those items, so make sure that everything's inside that box that you've created. Once you have everything selected, left click and then right click to confirm. Notice then my end trims have been selected. My kit that fills the gap between two panels and an inline connection, as well as my finished channels in a two-way, have been selected. Now there might be incidents in which you have maybe two end trims located here to two-way. In that instance, I would go back and look and make sure that they're snapped on node. If you have used, as an example, and I'm going to see if my settings will come up here. If you have used endpoint, midpoint, center, or any other selection here, you'll find that your drafting settings will throw off the accuracy of your auto connectors feature. Make sure that the only selection made is node. So with node selected, that's one way to problem solve. Another is, let's say for instance I had a reconfiguration and there was just one finished channel that I needed to place here in the corner. Most common users would select Auto Hardware and circle just this one area. The problem is you don't realize, but all the other connectors, you have a really good chance of them being doubled up. So a good way to simply identify that they are doubled up is a command called overkill in AutoCAD. If I select overkill and then select enter, it's going to ask me to pick my object. So again, I'm going to make sure I want you to clean everything up that's inside that typical. And then I'm going to confirm. And you're going to see a dialog box possibly pop up. You want to make sure you have the last three items selected because these are the types of symbols that have been created. So I'm going to say OK. Now, A way to see if you had anything doubled up is by selecting F2. That'll give you the command screen. You'll notice here that I actually didn't have anything doubled up, so the computer knew not to do that. But again, you don't want to make that a habit by just circling the area you need to have a connector. If you want, you can actually circle the entire station, and to run auto connectors on top of auto connectors is completely accurate. That's the way the program's designed to be run. Now the same would also be true of auto brackets. When thinking about auto brackets, I'm going to select the AB icon because my preferences have been set first. With my pick box, I'm now going to circle my entire station, right click to confirm, and it'll take a moment for my brackets to appear. But you'll notice you have boxes with L's and boxes with R's. Those are your right and left edge brackets. Now, some might say, well, if I have a PED supporting my surface, couldn't I go in and simply delete this bracket? That would be true of Cetra as an example, but not Interworks EQ. You want to leave that bracket into place, and I say that because, remember, Interworks EQ has a polymer hinge, and the panel's in place with carpet grippers based on the flexibility of that hinge. So without that edge bracket, you actually run the risk of the panels being pulled away from the work surfaces and storage. So in this instance, you want to make sure that those brackets are there. Notice that you have an LC located in two positions, and that's a left cantilever. Left cantilevers, again, are just based on the handed positions. If you wanted to delete one left and put in a right, you could. If you were to rerun auto connectors, it would override that. So I typically go with what the computer's generated unless it's incorrect. And typically when I find it's incorrect, it's because I have done something wrong. Then notice the corner is a right edge bracket. Now that could have easily have been a left because it can connect in either position of those panels. Notice my cantilever's also been used with two flat brackets, so that's what makes my cantilever universal. Even though it's specified as a left, used in conjunction at that seam with two flat brackets gives it that ability. And then finally, I'm going to go into my electrical hardware for auto feature, and I'm going to select my parts based on an 8-wire system. Right click and say OK. Now I'm going to scroll in tight here because I don't think it necessarily comes up well, and I see two things. One, I see an error, and two, I see my jumper. So I'm going to go in here and delete my error. Notice that I have an EJA here, and that's my panel-to-panel jumper. The error that I deleted was that here I have what's known as an I-kit, and that's again to fill from panel to panel the gap between the two panels. I also have that same error here. Sometimes these errors occur, and I've used this drawing as, for several modules today, so it's possible that what I've done is kind of confuse the computer in what I'm doing. So I'm going to assume that's what I've done here. I don't see that it's actually an incorrect specification issue simply because those panels were snapped in line and I did have the correct connectors generate before. So sometimes this occurs. You just have to be mindful of maybe your steps got off or some other issue. But keep in mind that again, auto connectors is here simply to help you move the process of specification along a little faster. You'll want to go in and clean it up and make sure that it represents accurate specification information always. So that's it for this module. A little bit more detail about auto connectors, auto brackets, and auto hardware. If you have any questions about these features, please feel free to reach out to olivia.deventi@kimball.com.